So this lesson then is 5.6, using formulae. Our objectives today then to be able to substitute values into a formula and to know the difference between an expression, an equation and a formula. So to start, let's just check our prior knowledge then. To be able to complete this lesson, you need to have an understanding of expressions and equations. You need to be able to use BIDMAS, so remembering that's brackets, indices, multiply, divide, add and subtract. You should know the negative number rules, so plus plus is equal to plus, plus minus equals minus, minus plus is equal to minus, and minus minus equals plus. And you should know how to calculate with negative numbers. So for example, minus 2 plus minus 3 is the same as minus 2 minus 3, which is equal to minus 5. And we're multiplying 4 times minus 3, so a positive times a negative is negative, and 4 times 3 is 12, and we get minus 12. Things you need to be able to complete this lesson: you need your maths book or some paper, a pen or a pencil, and a scientific calculator. Make sure you've got those before we start. Okay, so we're going to start then with looking at substitution. And what does substitution mean? Okay, well, it can mean lots of different things in different situations. So if you play football, as substitute, you're swapping one player for another. So essentially it means to swap one thing for something else. And in maths, it means we're going to swap the letters in an expression or an equation with numbers. So we can evaluate an expression, so we've got 4 plus 3n, by substituting in different values for n. Let's just look at those keywords first then. So it asks us to evaluate. Evaluate means we need to find the value of our expression. So it's an expression, 4 plus 3n is a collection of terms and operators. So our terms 4 and 3n are operator plus. You'll notice our expression does not have an equal sign. And substituting, as we've just said, means we're going to swap the letter n for a value of n. So if the value of n is 5, we're going to swap n for 5. Now remember, when we replace the letter n with 5, I can't just put in a 5 in place of n and have 4 plus 35, because that would look like 4 plus 35. 3n means 3 times n. So if I want to take out the n and put a 5 in, I need to also replace the multiplication symbol. So you'll see that here. Okay, so I've taken out the value of n, we've swapped it with 5, but we've put back in that multiplication symbol. So that's the substituting part. And now we have to evaluate. We have to find the value of those numbers. Now to do that, we must follow BIDMAS. So remember, BIDMAS was brackets, indices, divide, multiply, addition and subtraction. So we've got a choice of addition or multiplication. Multiplication comes first, so we're going to do the multiplication bit first. So 3 times 5, which is 15. Now you notice that although I worked that out first, 3 times 5 is 15, I've not written 15 first. The 4 came first, so it still goes first, then my plus 15 afterwards. So try and keep them in the same order. It helps to go down the page and you can line them up afterwards. Don't switch round the order. This will cause you confusion when we have negative numbers later. Now we've only got one operation then, so 4 plus 15 is 19. So when n is 5, the value of our expression is 19. Let's just do that one more time. So this time n equals 11. So this time we're going to swap n for 11. So we get 4 plus 3 times 11. Again, following BIDMAS, we do the 3 times 11 first, and we get 4 plus 33. 4 plus 33 is 37. So when n is 11, the value of our expression is 37. Okay, let's move on to a new example then. So again, we're asked to evaluate the expression 2 brackets n plus 8 close bracket. And again, we're going to try different values of n. So this time n is 6. So again, we're going to swap the letter n for 6. Now n has no numbers in front of it this time, so I don't need to replace any multiplication symbols. Simply got to put it back in. But the 2 in front of the brackets, remember, is multiplied. So it might help you to put that in there so that you can see that that's multiplied. Following BIDMAS, BIDMAS says we do the brackets first, so we're going to work out the value in the brackets, which is the 6 plus 8, and we get 2 times 14 again, although I've worked this out first. There was a 2 times in front of the answer to it, so we've put that back in the same order. Then we can do 2 times 14, which is 28. So when n is 6, our expression is worth 28. Last time then, so n this time is 13, so we're going to replace n with 13. That's our substitution done. Now you'll always get a mark for doing the substitution correctly, so make sure that you do that bit first. Then we work it out. So again, brackets first, we get 2 times 21, and 2 times 21 is 42. So when n is 13, our expression has a value of 42. Make sure you're happy with substituting in and where you need to replace the multiplication sign. It's the only symbol that you'll need to put in if it's not there. All the others will be there. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit more complicated then. So we've got 5 different expressions, and this time we've got 3 different values to substitute. A is 5, B is 2, and C is -1. So we're first of all going to do the substitution step. So we're simply going to swap those letters for those numbers. So in our first one, A plus B plus C. A was 5, so we've replaced it with 5. B was 2, we've replaced it with 2. And C was -1. Now you notice the symbols plus and plus we had already. So even though C is -1, we still have to have this plus here that was from our value here. Now we're going to need to work that out. Now the first problem we've got is we've got 2 symbols together, and we don't really like that. So using our negative number rules, plus and minus make a minus. Remember, 2 different symbols will always be negative, 2 same symbols will always be positive. So we're going to swap these out because we don't like to have 2 symbols in the middle. So there we are. Our 5 plus 2 is the same, and our plus minus has become a single minus, and then our 1. Now we can use BIDMAS to work out our answer. So 5 plus 2 minus 1 is 6. Our second one then, 3A, remember means 3 times A, plus 2C, so that's 2 times C. So we're going to have to put some multiplication symbols back in. So we substitute in. So our 3 times A, which was 5, plus 2 times C, which was -1. And now we're going to follow BIDMAS. So BIDMAS says we do the multiplication first. We've got 2 sets of multiplication to do. We've got the 3 times 5 to do, and we've got the 2 times -1. 3 times 5 is 15, 2 times -1 is -2, and this plus, remember, is still in the middle. Again, I have 2 symbols. We need to change that to 1. So a positive and negative, 2 different symbols together, make a negative. So that's 15 minus 2. And our value is 13. So with these, you really do need to do just 1 step at a time. Don't rush it, don't try to do too much at once. For 3 then, again, first step, substitution. A was 5. I put the multiplication sign back in because there's no symbol between the A and the bracket, so it must be a multiply. Remember, that's the only symbol that's ever missing. B was 2 plus, our plus, and then C is -1. So again, we've got 2 symbols together, so I'm always going to sort these out first. So 2 different symbols makes it negative, so I've changed it to a negative here. Now I can follow BIDMAS. Brackets first, 2 times -1 is -2. Excuse me, that's a mistake there. Okay, sorry about that, little typing error in there. So 5 times -2. 2 times -1 is -2. 5 times -2 then is -10. Our next one then. So A, B, C. So no symbols at all, so they must be multiplied. So it must be A times B times C. So we're going to have to put these multiplications back in with our numbers. So we get 5 times 2 times -1. Because they're all multiplication, it doesn't matter which order we do it in. So we can work from left to right as long as all these symbols are the same. So 5 times 2 is 10. 10 times -1 is also -10. Our last one then, so we've got a few more things in here. We've got a squared And we've got our fraction line here, remember, which is a division. First step though is still always to substitute. So our b was 2, so we've now got 2 squared, minus our c, which is minus 1. Okay, so be really careful here. The temptation is, because there's a minus here, to forget to put the minus that goes with the 1 in as well. We've got to substitute it first, and a is 5. First step, deal with any double symbols. So 2 negatives together, remember 2 same symbols will always make a positive. Okay, so we've changed it to positive, and 2 squared is 2 times itself twice, so 2 times 2 is 4. When we see this fraction line, we work out the top line and we work out the bottom line separately. So our top line, 4 plus 1 is 5. Our bottom line was just 5. And 5 divided by 5 is 1. Make a note of those, check you're happy with those before you move on. So the key steps are: first, substitute the numbers exactly, then deal with any double symbols, then use BIDMAS to find the value of the expression. Okay, so there are 3 different choices here for you to do. We've got the red ones, the sort of orangey colour, and the green ones. So you need to choose where you want to start with these. So the red ones are the slightly easier ones. Moving on to the green, which are the more challenging. There's orange in the middle, a sort of part way between. So decide where you need to start from, pause the video, have a go at those questions. Okay, let's have a look at the answer to those then. So if we start with the red ones, we've got 3 plus 2 plus 7, which equals 12. For B, we've got 3 times 2 times 7, which is 42. For C, we've got 2 times 7 minus 3, which is 11. And for D, we've got 3 squared plus 2, which is also 11. For the orange ones then, we've got 3 times 6 plus 2, all divided by 5, which equals 4. For B, we've got 6 times 5, all divided by 2, which is 15. For C then, we've got 6 times 2 times 2 plus 5, all divided by 3, which comes to 5. And for D, we've got 6 squared plus 2 squared divided by 5, sorry, which comes to 8. Finally, the green then. So the green, we've got our negative number in there, so be careful with that one. We've got 2 plus minus 3 plus 8, which is 7. We've got 2 times minus 3, which is minus 6. We've got 2 times 8 minus minus 3, which is 19. And finally, 2 squared plus minus 3 squared, be careful with that one, is 13. Okay, so well done if you did manage to get that last one. So the key to this last one is knowing that any number squared will always be positive. So minus 3 squared is plus 9, and 2 squared is 4. So 4 plus plus, which is also plus, so 4 plus 9 is 13. Okay, we're now going to have a look then at formulae. So what is a formula? So in maths, a formula is a rule for working something out. Okay, so for example, if we wanted to work out the number of days in a given number of weeks, we always start a formula with the thing we're trying to find. So we want to find the number of days, and that's equal to 7 times the number of weeks. There are 7 days in every week. So if I want to know the number of days in 1 week, I'll do 7 times 1, which is 7 days. If I want to know the number of days in 2 weeks, I do 7 times 2. So we have the 7, which we call a fixed value. There are always 7 days in a week. And our variable, which is the thing we're going to substitute and change. So that's the number of weeks. So given any number of weeks, if someone asked me how many days in 10 weeks, I would do 7 times 10, and I would be able to tell them there are 70 days in 10 weeks. So it's a rule that helps us to find something out. It usually has a practical purpose to it. So our formula then is a special type of equation, which is linking physical values. Some of the ones you may know already. The area A of a rectangle of length L and width W is given by the formula A equals LW. So if we want to find the area of a rectangle, we've used A to stand for area, and it's told us that here is equal to the length times the width. Remember, when they're next to each other, they're multiplied. So again, the thing we wanted to find is always first, and then we have our variables here. If we want to find the circumference of a circle with the diameter d, it's given by the formula C equals pi times d. Okay, so the thing we want to find is the circumference, and to find that we use pi. Now pi is an irrational number, it's stored in your calculator, multiplied by its diameter. So pi is our fixed value, pi is always the same, but the d, the diameter, is our variable. We can change that to get different circumferences for different circles. So these are some that you might be familiar with already. Here we have one then, the distance d in meters. So they're telling us which letter they've used for which word, so that we know what the letter stands for. That an object falls after being dropped is given by the formula d equals 4.9 times t squared, where t is the time in seconds. So they'll always tell you what the letters stand for, so you know d is for distance and t is time in seconds. Okay, we're going to find out then, if a boy drops a rock from a 100-metre cliff, how far it will fall after 2 seconds, 3 seconds and 5 seconds. So to do that, we want to find the distance d, so the formula is already in the right format for us, d equals, we need to substitute the value of t. So t is the time in seconds, so this 2 here is now t, and we simply substitute it into the formula. So when t is 2, d is 4.9 times 2 squared. So again, the first step is our substitution, and then we solve again following BIDMAS. So 2 squared is 4, so we'll do 4.9 times 4, and we get 19.6 meters. Our distance was in meters. So we're using our substitution. This time it says substituting into an expression. We're substituting into a formula because we want to find a physical answer, which is our distance in this case. If t was 3, we're going to swap t for 3 instead. So our distance would equal 4.9 times 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, so we do 4.9 times 9, which gives us 44.1 meters. So after 2 seconds, it's dropped nearly 20 meters. After 3, it's gone a bit over 40 meters. What about after 5 seconds then? So let's substitute t for 5. So our distance is 4.9 times 5 squared. 5 squared is 25, so 4.9 times 25, and that comes to 122.5 meters. So after 5 seconds, it's gone 122.5 meters. Now, what problems can you spot with the answer to part C? Have a little look, have a think, any ideas on what might be a problem with that answer? Okay, well, hopefully you've spotted that it said at the top, the boy drops a rock from a 100-metre high cliff. So the cliff is only 100 metres high, and yet after 5 seconds, we're saying the rock has dropped 122.5. So essentially it's gone through the floor and further down, so that can't happen. So with these reasoning questions, remember you have to go back, reread through the question, have a look at your answer, and see if you can spot any issues with it. So obviously the rock must have hit the floor before 5 seconds, because the cliff is only 100 metres high, and after 5 it should go 122. So it must hit the floor between somewhere between 3 and 5 seconds. Okay, so now it's your turn then. So you've been given 2 questions. The first one's about speed, distance and time. You've been given a formula there. And the second one is about the cost of staying in a hotel. So remember our steps then. We're substituting in our values instead of the letters. Then we're using BIDMAS to find our value. Pause the video, have a go at that in your maths book now. Okay, let's have a look then. So our first one, speed is equal to distance divided by time. We're asked to find the speed. So we're going to swap the distance for 12 and the time for 3. So we're going to do 12 divided by 3, which equals 4 kilometers an hour. For the next one, D is 70, T is 2. So 70 divided by 2 is 35 kilometers per hour. For number 3, we've got 20 divided by 0.5. Now remember, dividing by a half is the same as multiplying by 2, so if you're doing it without a calculator, we get 40 kilometers per hour. The next one, 80 divided by 2.5 is 32 kilometers per hour. For our next one then, we've got the cost of staying at the hotel is 50D, so remember that's 50 times D, so 50 times the number of days plus 20. We've got 3 days, so we're going to swap D for 3. So we've got 50 times 3 plus 20, making sure we follow BIDMAS, we get £170. For 6 days, we're going to swap D for 6, so 50 times 6 plus 20 is £320. And the last one, be careful with the last one, look, 2 weeks. Now we've been given D, which is the number of days. So in 2 weeks there are 14 days, so we've got to do 50 times 14 plus 20, which is £720. So whenever you're reading your question, make sure that the units you've got in your question match the ones in your formula. If they don't, you might have to change them first. Okay, so finally then today, our last objective then, we need to look at expressions, equations and formulae. We need to be able to tell the difference between them. So, an expression is a collection of terms and operators without an equal sign. So remember, terms are numbers and letters, operators are our plus, minus, times, divide and brackets. An equation links an expression with a number or another expression via an equal sign. It contains unknown values, which we usually have as letters, and can be solved to find the value of the letters. And the important thing with our equation is it does have an equal sign and we can solve it. And finally, a formula then. So a formula, a group of values that have a relationship between them, and substitution can be used to find an unknown value. Please make a note of these in your book. You may be asked to explain the difference between them. Okay, some examples then. So expressions then. So we said expressions have terms and operators. So 3a plus 2, so we've got a term, an operator and a term. 5x is a term. And we've got 8 brackets t minus 4 brackets. So we've got the terms 8 and t and 4, and our operators are minus and our brackets there. Equations. So equations are expressions linked to a number. So here's an expression, 2a plus 3, so a collection of terms and operators linked to a number by an equal sign. So that turns it from an expression into an equation. Or we've got an expression here, an expression the other side linked by an equal sign. These can be solved to find the letter X or the letter A here. And even here, so although it's got 2 different letters, okay, it still can be an equation, and we can solve it to find 2 different values. Finally then, our formulae. So remember, formulae is the plural of formula. So our formula, we would need to know values to substitute to be able to solve. I can't solve it by rearranging it. So A equals LW, that's our formula for the area of a rectangle. D equals M divided by V, that's a formula for density. Density equals mass divided by volume. And the other one we've already looked at, C equals pi d, the circumference of a circle, equals pi times the diameter. So to be able to find any of the values, we would need to be told other values which we can substitute in. So that's the difference between the three. It is worth making a note of examples of each, and you may be asked to identify which ones are which. So that leads us on then to our final task for today's lesson. So for each of these, you simply need to state whether it's an expression, an equation, or a formula. So pause the video, write these down in your book, and then write down next to them one of those three words. Okay, so let's talk through the solutions to these then. So our first one, we've got an expression, we've got an equal sign and another expression, so that makes it an equation. In this one, we've got lots of different letters, no numbers, so we would need to substitute to find it, so it must be a formula. This one has no equal sign at all, so it must be an expression. So that's the easy ones to spot. No equals at all, an expression every time. For D then, okay, again, we've got some letters, but we've got an expression linked to another letter, so that's an equation. Here, an expression linked to another expression, so again an equation. And here, we've got lots and lots of different letters. We would be needing some values to substitute in to find these, so it must be a formula. Okay, so expression is the really easy one. No equal sign, it has to be an expression. The difference for an equation and a formula. An equation we could rearrange to solve, so often they have the same letter, so that we can rearrange to solve it. Formulae tend to have lots of different letters, and we need to be able to substitute to find values. Okay, thank you for working through that lesson today. Then next time we will be looking at rearranging formulae.